Carmelo Anthony took the high road in response to George Karl's personal attacks of him in his new book, Furious George. Anthony is staying mellow.
When you're there, it's just a different story, than what you hear after the fact. I never knew it was this much. I never knew I was I don't know, what's the word, conundrum? I don't even know what the hell that means, to be honest with you. So I never knew that, that never was kind of brought up. Anybody that you ask, assistant coaches, players, front office people, anybody you ask, I'll tell you, sing a different tune when it comes to me and when it comes to kind of our mentality on that team.
Another person Karl called out in his book was Kenyon Martin, who decided to unload on Twitter last night. Here's one of his tweets. "I didn't have a father growing up. We all know that. What's George Karl's excuse for being a terrible person?" Here's another one. "Everyone that's played for that awful person and coach can't stand the ground he walks on. George Karl is selfish, unhappy, miserable, and a cowardly person. No wonder he's been fired every place he has coached." Stephen A., what do you make of the latest?
Well, what you make of the latest is what I said yesterday in my final take. It was betrayal on the part of George Karl, and that hurts me to say that because I happen to believe he's a good coach because his record says so. But none of their emotions surprised me. It was very predictable what a guy like Kenyon Martin could do, was going to say, because Max, he's as real as it gets. Kenyon Martin ain't lying to anybody. He's not going to be a phony. He's as real and as authentic as it gets. He's going to look you in your face and tell you how he feels. And if George Karl was in front of his face, to be quite honest with you, I would be scared of what Kenyon Martin might decide to do to him, if I'm being totally honest with you. In the case of Carmelo Anthony was class personified, and he didn't want to get into it. But trust you me, I told you on many, many occasions, I've known Carmelo Anthony pretty much his entire career. I know this brother. We're pretty cool with one another. And I'm telling you right now, I don't care how cool he was yesterday, at some point in time, he's going to divulge a lot of things he feels about George Karl. He's just going to decide when that time is and who he's going to tell it to. But trust me, he will address it. He's probably waiting until the book officially comes out and George Karl goes on his tour. Now let's get specific in terms of what Carmelo Anthony could have said but didn't, and probably will address sometime down the line. He may address the fact that George Karl, Denver wanted to fire this guy, and Carmelo Anthony played a very pivotal role in George Karl getting an extension in excess of $26 million, and still George Karl was unhappy because he wanted the Popovich deal that gave him the president and the GM title. He might tell you that George Karl never wanted Allen Iverson. He might tell you that George Karl looked Chauncey Billups in the face and told him to figure out something because I'm going to hand the ball to Ty Lawson, even though Chauncey Billups was the clear leader of the team. Everybody loved playing with him and for him and him being that leader. He might tell you that Karl was ticked off at Melo because Karl wanted him to go to New Jersey because George Karl wanted Derek Favors at the time. He didn't want him to go to New York because you have to take back equitable compensation, and George Karl didn't like anything that New York had to offer. Carmelo Anthony might decide to tell you all of those things and then some. But in the end, what he said was very, very profound, and it's something that we all need to hold on to. And what that is this. They have been betrayed. You've got Phil Jackson with Kobe years ago. To a much stronger degree, based on these excerpts, that is, we might look at George Karl, and what we see is betrayal. Coaches coming up to you, talking to you, trying to ingratiate themselves with you in order to get you to maximize your potential to their liking. And in the process, they get very, very personal and probe, and to turn around and not only to say the things that you say, calling Carmelo Anthony a user of people, bringing up him and Kenyon Martin and talking about the absence of a father figure. Basically, they didn't have anybody to teach them how to act like a man. But then you go and you write a book where you're literally generating revenue and profit for yourself based on your incendiary comments about them is as inexcusable as it gets. It's a violation of a code of ethics when it comes to coaches, and that is what you have to peel from this. This is some stuff. it's pretty close to unforgivable what George Karl did. And I hate to say it because I've always liked the man. I'm incredibly disappointed that he would engage in this kind of betrayal towards former players.
It's totally understandable that Kenyon Martin is very angry, and it's fun to hear him express that anger. I think Carmelo looks a little better today for keeping it classy, basically, right? For not responding, for taking the high road. It makes George Karl actually look worse in comparison to Carmelo. Kenyon Martin has kind of, I wouldn't say lowered himself to George Karl's level, but well, maybe he's kind of rolling around in the gutter with him when he goes at him that way. But it is satisfying for those who feel that George Karl, stepped over the line to hear Kenyon Martin vent that anger. I want to tell people how this generally works. Generally, how it happens in this industry, and Stephen A., I'm sure you've gotten this call, I've gotten this call, let alone famous coaches and players, is you'll get a call from an agent, from an agent at your agency, maybe your agent, or they put you in touch with a literary agent at the agency, and they'll say, hey, we can get you in advance to do this kind of book. In the case of George Karl, I imagine, though I don't know, but I imagine, because this is usually the way it goes, that he gets a call from an agent at some point and says, hey, if you are willing to dish on these players, we can get you in advance for a book. No one wants to hear just a coach talking about generalities. I mean, it's not, does anyone really think George Karl had this burning desire as a literary figure to express himself through written word, and that's why this book exists? No. It's a for-profit venture based on an idea I imagine was not his, the genesis of it, but it could have been. But generally, that's not the way these things work. Where if he if he tells, then, he gets in advance and maybe they can do something with the book. Now, there is value in this kind of book for the fans, and it has always been this way, the fans get an inside look, a behind-the-scenes look, at least according to one of the participants, in how the world of sports works, in this case, the NBA. And there is value in that. However, in order to bring fans that value, someone's got to sell someone out. And in this, you can't have it both ways. So, yes, there is value in what they do, but George Karl, in order to do it, sold players out, revealed moments that there was an implicit assumption of privacy, made them public, did it in a way that makes them look bad, and he has to live with that, and the reaction of the players who are like, time out, coach, you're making money by betraying us. That's all legitimate.
Yeah. Well, listen, let's get back to Kenyon Martin and what you said about Kenyon Martin. Kenyon Martin may not look as good as Carmelo Anthony, but understand that it's impossible for him to do so. Carmelo Anthony is still playing. Kenyon Martin is not.
Good point.
So as a result, the platform that Carmelo Anthony has available to him, he could be more judicious, more diplomatic. He can take his time, and also by still going out there and performing, he knows this is not the last time he's going to get asked about George Karl, so he can afford to collect his thoughts, put things together, and his response is still going to be relevant in the collective mind's eye of the fourth estate, the media, and beyond. In the case of Kenyon Martin, who's sitting at home minding his business, his NBA career behind him, not to mention the fact that he wasn't the most talkative dude to begin with. I don't think he looks bad at all because he's responding to a man who personally attacked him while he was home minding his business.
One comment about that quickly. Kenyon Martin didn't say anything that's over the line, particularly because of the way George Karl went at him. I'm not suggesting that. Everything he said, he's justified in saying.
Yep. I just need to add one thing before we go to break. Obviously, I don't have intimate details and know these guys like you do, Stephen A., but I was very irked and found it so weak that you attack a man for not having a father. That's something that's out of their control. It's a sensitive subject. Why would you ever go there? And it shows a lot about his character. And this is me from a distance knowing nothing. But we do have to go to break. Yep.
That's exactly what I mentioned in Final Take yesterday. That was the lowest blow of them all.
Yeah. So with the Giants' loss, the Cowboys clinched the division and the 1 seed in the playoffs. So with nothing really to play for in their next 2 games, should they rest their stars like Dak and Zeke? That is the question, one Stephen A. Smith.
Well, I definitely think that they should. I think that they should, because this is football. Football is a very physical and violent sport. I'm not sitting there and saying that you should give them no action and allow rust to enter the equation. But in terms of the frequent activity that obviously they've been accustomed to playing all season long, I don't think that's something that they should be subjected to in the sport of football now that they've clinched the division in the top seed. If you're going to have the top seed, all right, you're the number 1 seed, and obviously you've already clinched your division title as well. What the hell is there to play for? What you don't want to, I understand that they're rookies, particularly in the case of a Dak Prescott. And so you want those reps to be something that's there. But at the same time, what you don't want to do is sit there and expose somebody to unnecessary risk of injury, because this is a sport that is so violent that it's just unnecessary to do that. It has nothing to do with, there's no football reason that I would pick to rest these guys other than a concern for injury, because you've got other teams literally fighting for their lives trying to get to that postseason, trying to get that extra dough, trying to get that extra shine, et cetera, et cetera. So if you've already accomplished that goal in a sport as physical and as violent as football, you might need to protect yourself and risk a little rust coming into the equation just to preserve yourself to be 100% healthy. I'm not saying you don't play at all, but you do have to protect yourself.
This is not an easy question to answer, because it presents itself at the end of every season in the NFL nowadays, and really always has. But especially,
there's nothing that's easy for you. Nothing.
But except for beating you in arguments. But especially since the Giants and the Coughlin season in 2007, where the Patriots were undefeated and the Giants had the playoff. They had a playoff berth wrapped up, and he decided to play the guys anyway. And I think that indicated something to people. At least it did to me since then. The Dallas Cowboys have been doing things a certain way all year. And except for 2 games against those Giants, they have always won. It's worked for them. And so while you're right, Stephen A., I'm not just brushing off the fact that this is a violent, full-contact sport where it's oftentimes foolish to play someone if you don't have to, because every play could be the last play of someone's career. That's the nature of the sport. Nevertheless, if you've been doing something a certain way and you've been achieving success all year, the last thing I would want as a Cowboys fan is for anything to change. I would want them to approach every single game the exact same way.
Donovan, before you speak, let me just remind you that that's the same thing Max Kellerman said to Bernard Hopkins before his last fight. Let's go on. Let's go on.
Let's
go on. Let's go.
Hey, he slipped. He slipped, Stephen. He slipped and got pushed.
Don't make fun of Bernard Hopkins. He's great, even though you have a right to, more so than anybody else. But I'm going to come to my boys back here. Leave him alone, D. Leave him alone.
52 years old. What do you want from him?
Hey, man, you got to make a decision. But let me add to what you said now, Max. Back in 2004, when we went to the Super Bowl, I believe we clinched by week 10, week 11. And what we did was we played, but we sat some players. Now, when I look at the Dallas Cowboys, in a sense, going into a game where they know they already have won the NFC East and they have home field advantage, I think the players that you decide to sit is an Ezekiel Elliott and maybe a Tyron Smith. Now, for Dak Prescott, I think it's important for him to keep this momentum going and maybe play about 3 series in this particular game. Then you'll see Tony Romo. I think the smart thing for Jason Garrett is to understand what's ahead of him and knowing the age of these players. Now, we've seen Ezekiel Elliott and how many carries that he's had thus far at this particular point. It's important that he has an opportunity to give Darren McFadden some carries to kind of kick the rust off just in case you need that backup running back. And also for the offensive line to keep that cohesiveness and also that chemistry to continue to flow. The thing that I look at on the defensive end, who would you sit on defense? And to be honest with you, I wouldn't sit anybody. Maybe Sean Lee. Because I think defensively, they're going to get much more than they think they can handle going into the playoffs because Rob Marinelli does not blitz a lot. So you're going to keep playing these zone defenses and your defensive line and maybe bring in 2 from the weak, 2 from the strong just to try to apply pressure. And they haven't been that successful with it, with the blitz all season. Yeah, they've played well as far as in the zone and maybe getting rushed from their front 4. But can you do that versus a Green Bay? Can you do that maybe against, teams that continue to run the ball effectively and the play-action game plays such a major part? But I think for Jason Garrett and the Dallas Cowboys, the way that you approach this thing is to continue to get the reps from Dak Prescott to keep his confidence going and keep that momentum going on offense and sit a guy like Ezekiel Elliott.
You know what the problem with that to me is, Donovan? That you have a first-round bye. Like, how you're going to have like a month between games at a certain point, and especially, I understand what you mean. Look, it's the running back. You got to get other guys involved. I'm not claiming it's so cut and dried, but I really think, especially because they're young players, especially because the margin of error in the NFL is really small, even for the good teams, because it's so physical, at the point of contact, at the line of scrimmage, because their success is based on that offensive line, and then what these special players behind that line, like Zeke and Dak, can do with that. I just wouldn't change anything. I mean, maybe you give a guy, you take him out for some downs. You're not gonna play them quite as much as you would in every other game. But I would still try to win the game to the best of my ability.
Absolutely.
I would still approach it the way they've approached every game this season because they've had so much success. You don't want to break that, particularly when you have a first-round bye.
You're so Donovan, didn't you hear the brilliance of Max Kellerman? You don't want to break that rhythm, break that.
Right.
You don't want to break anything. Go ahead and break your bones, though. It's okay.
Right,
It's okay.
yeah.
I mean, in Max's world, go ahead and break your wrist, break your elbow, break your neck, break your leg,
you gotta
crack
take
your
risks.
kneecap and that. Oh, go ahead. Don't worry about the rhythm. Worry about the
Right.
rhythm, Donovan.
Right.
Don't disrupt your flow, but go out there and break your bones. It's okay.
Right.
You gotta
It's
take
okay
that
in the
risk.
world of
You
Max
got
Kellerman.
to take
It's all
that
right.
risk.
Bernard Hopkins, go out there and risk getting your jaw broke.
You gotta
It's
bring it to
okay.
get it.
It's okay.
That's right. As James Toney said, you got to bring it to get it. I
Yeah,
mean,
you
if
got
you're
to
talking about middleweights.
But that's what I'm talking about, Max, and that's why I say it's important to start a guy like Dak Prescott. Maybe sit Tyron Smith and Jason Witten. Jason Witten, he deserves a rest. But I think in a sense, it's about chemistry and flow. And when you're going into the playoffs, if you have the momentum and you have that confidence going in, and no matter what situation that you may have been in, and they have been in a lot of great situations, 2-minute drill at the end, overtime wins. Dak Prescott has done a great job. And I've been hearing a lot of people, rumors are there on the outside talking about that now all of a sudden Dak Prescott is a check down Charlie, and he's a guy you want to force to throw deep. Did they not see him in the preseason throwing the ball deep and completing the things that he can do with the deep ball? But the thing with me with the Dallas Cowboys is, can they keep this momentum going into the playoffs? And if they can do that and playing in that NFC Championship at home against maybe a team like the Seattle Seahawks, where offensively we're still trying to figure out if they can run the football and stay on the field during third down and converting those big third and longs, that's going to be a matchup you want to see.
I will say this. Donovan swayed me in this regard. You rest some of the guys on offense. You don't have to rest everybody. Some of those guys on defense need to be out there. First of all, their defense has gotten better and better. It needs to improve. And dare I bring this up, Donovan, everybody hasn't been eligible on Dallas's defense. So you got to get some guys up in there
is that,
to
Stephen
actually
A?
get some reps.
Why is that, Stephen A?
I mean, because they couldn't stay off the weed. And that's what really happens. And so we have to make sure that they come back in the mix, Max. They need the reps. They need to get out there. They don't need time to puff, and pass. What they need to do is be out on the football field getting those reps in and all of that other stuff. So that's another reason, man.
Right.
Some of them do deserve to rest. Others need to get on the field and sort of get the chemistry going. You know what I'm saying?
We got it.
Not the chemicals going, the chemistry.
Yeah.
Not chemicals,
Real smooth.
chemistry. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
I was just curious
That's all I'm
about
saying.
your opinion about this because you haven't gotten to weigh in. Lane Johnson turned out to be important, right?
Yeah, really
Johnson,
important.
I just wanted to make sure.
Talked about it most of the
Did
broadcast.
you really bring that back up, Max?
I was just, I don't know. I wanted to make sure Molly got to weigh in.
I saw it.
Yeah, I still don't feel it was as big of a deal as you say it is.
All right. You know what's going to be a big deal if Antonio Ramiro Romo shows up in the game? We will see if that happens.